I'm the founder of Academy. I'm a Rebel Educator. We're always looking for ways to push the status quo and make change in the tradition that has become education. So Up Academy is a progressive project-based school. We've been a K to 5. We're launching a middle school this fall, so we will be a TK to 8.
All right, this is another episode of the Founders Pack Form Your Own Pack podcast. My guest today is Tanya Sheckley from Up Academy. How are you doing, Tanya?
I'm great. Thanks, Michael. How are you?
Things are good. I'm really excited to finally get to talk to you. I know we were kind of playing a little bit of tag. So for people that don't know, who is Tanya and what is Up Academy?
I'm the founder of Academy. I'm a Rebel Educator. We're always looking for ways to push the status quo and make change in the tradition that has become education. So Up Academy is a progressive project-based school. We've been a K to 5. We're launching a middle school this fall, so we will be a TK to 8 this year. But really focused on creating meaningful and impactful experiences with and for our students.
So what was the big motivation for starting your own school?
A great question. I spent a decade in beer before this, and then I was a stay-at-home mom for almost another decade as my children were born. But my oldest daughter was born with cerebral palsy, and find the right educational fit for her, where she was going to get the therapeutics she needed to be independent, and also the academic she was going to need to be successful, just wasn't something that we found other schools did well. And I could see the possibilities with what was happening with neurodevelopment, with robotics, with mind machine interfaces, and knowing that so many things might be possible for her with or without the use of her body, if she had the right education. And so we did put her in a public school. It was a project-based public school. We had some amazing educators who had a lot of experience both in special ed and general education, and we saw how well mixed abilities could work together in a project-based experience. And that was really the foundation and the inspiration for what formed what is now Up Academy.
So you've referenced the project-based aspect of it. What is special about that? And then what's the alternative versus what's the traditional route would you describe it as versus project-based?
So I'd say there are several different levels when we think of traditional education. Often we think of desks placed in a row, students facing the teacher. I'm of a generation where the student wrote or the teacher wrote with chalk on a chalkboard. So that might be part of the visualization. But everybody's sitting, listening, taking information, then they have to process and spit out on a test. Right? The only place this ever happens is at school. But that's the way we look at traditional education. There are a lot of educational models now that are saying they're more project-based, that they're more active, that there's more going on, and maybe they're bringing in something from mystery science for science. So the kids are up and doing experiments in the classroom, and they're not just reading from a book and memorizing and regurgitating. What we're doing kind of takes those activities one step farther, and we do trimester-long deep dives into a concept. So this year, our 3 trimester concepts were ecosystems of the galaxy, the economy, and right now our students are working on a civilizations unit. So it's 8 to 12 weeks where our educators put together the structure and framework of a project. We'll deep dive for our students into the standards they need to know, student interests, current events, social justice, humanities, history, science. All of these things get wrapped into one interdisciplinary project that will span the course of a trimester and really allow students to dive deep into those different concepts, dive deep into those ideas, dive deep into those activities, and find their own thing that they're interested in as well, that then they can follow and create for their deliverable or the way that they're going to share what they know with the community, with the other students in the class, with their parents, with outside community members often come and are a partner of these projects as well.
So there's mentorship and apprenticeship type scenarios, it sounds like.
Yeah, we try to find and work with experts wherever we can. So you mentioned you're in London right now. Our kinder and first grade class in their ecosystems of the galaxy learned a lot about the sand shortage and what was happening on a global scale with the ecology and why we were using sand at beaches all over the world. There's a woman in London who wrote a book about this and is known as the worldwide expert in the sand shortage. And
Oh, wow.
so she did several Zoom calls with our kinder and first grade class and worked with them, mentored them, shared her knowledge with them. And then they went and did a local beach cleanup here as a part of that project as well. So we're always looking to draw in community members, experts, authorities in different areas, but also to your question, as kids go into middle school, definitely mentors and apprenticeships as well. So they're getting that experience of what are these things that I like to do? What are careers that might be connected to that? And what does that really look like in the real world? To be able to give them just more background and experience so they know what they want to study and where they want to go and what they like to do and what they don't like to do.
I love hearing this because I think just even my own education experience, which is so long ago, but it's never ever ended. I think my frustration was I always enjoyed project-based work, and that's where I learned the most and excelled. And I always wondered, like, why are we doing this other stuff? It doesn't make sense. So, is there research to support that, or was it is it just like a gut thing that you knew that this was the way to go?
The short answer is for me, it was a gut thing that I knew it was the way to go. As I mentioned, my background's not in education.
That's probably
The deeper I get into education, there is a ton of research to support it. When we look at the neuroscience of learning and the way that we learn and maintain knowledge the best, it's when our body and our mind are in a sense of a kind of disharmony. We're in a space that's different from the space that we're normally in. There's something that's altered about our emotional or physical state. And through doing that, that's how we learn and the learning stays stickier. And that's essentially what project-based learning does every day. For us, for our littlest learners, it's why we teach phonics in a multisensory way. Our students are practicing phonics while they're jumping on the trampoline. So their body's busy, their brain can focus on the phonics. And they learn faster and it's stickier and they're able to transfer it to other areas of life much easier. And so that's a little kid example, but as you grow, the same things happen with projects. And it's often in my Rebel Educator podcast, it's one of the questions I ask, like, what do you remember from your elementary school years? And it's almost always a teacher who did something different, who took them on a cool field trip, who did an interesting project in class that was different than what they did every day, because those are the things that stay with us.
That's really interesting you say that. So I think I mentioned before, which is strange, but my side hustle's in hockey and I've coached hockey, and in the end you're coaching 12, 13, 14-year olds. And I just remember saying to kids like, what do you remember about school? Because I'll tell you what you will remember is you will remember games that you play. You will remember times when you have adversity and or you problem solved as a group or an individual to overcome things as a team in the sport. And but you probably won't remember a math class. So it's really interesting to hear you say that. So you're trying to capitalize on that, which is having this other association to anchor almost the learning experience.
Yeah, like almost nobody remembers how they learned to read, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
sitting around and having a teacher point out words to you. We don't remember that. We can read, but we don't remember how we learned to read. But when students have a meaningful driving question that they need to answer throughout their studies, that they remember.
That's interesting. Is there any opposition to this? And I'm curious about outcomes.
Um, Opposition might be a big word. There's definitely a lot of resistance.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that I've come across anybody out there saying, no, this doesn't work. But what there is change is hard. And when you look at changing as something as large as our school system, it's very challenging. And we're not at the point yet where, as a society, we're changing the way we're training leaders, changing the way we're training school leaders. And so we're getting the same education and the same outcome because we're continuing to do the same things. So for schools and areas that have done this, they've seen a ton of success. Like for us, when we do our MAP testing, which is a computer adaptive test. It's the closest thing we do to standardized testing as a school, but it measures growth in students, and we see our students growing at 2 to 3 times the national average of what they're growing in other schools. And it's because they're digging how and the why and how it connects to the world around them. Right? They're not looking at, okay, so I can grow a plant because I planted a seed. The plant needs water and oxygen and sunlight, and it grows. But instead, they're looking at that as what is part of the bigger cycle. What times of year does this plant grow? What is the cycle of seed to death and then regeneration back into the soil to renew the seed again? So instead of looking at things as static activities, we're looking at them in the bigger picture, in the cycle of the world and the cycle of life and how they connect to us. So yeah, we see incredible outcomes with our students. Our kids love to come to school. They don't like to go on winter break. They like the last day of school, we have kids crying every year because they don't want to have the summer off. They want to continue to go to school. It's wild. Like, honestly, I couldn't make this stuff up.
That's really
so yeah, and for places that are doing it, it works great. But like I said, I wouldn't say there's a lot of opposition, but I would say there's a lot of resistance to change.
Yeah, totally get it. I think I've shared this with you. Like, I'm of the feeling that we need mass customized education. So we basically need these different alternatives are more important than one monolithic. So I really, approach, and I really applaud the way that you're doing this, because I think this is one little drop in that giant bucket. So I don't think we have to fix the system. We just need to dismember it in a sense. Like, it needs to be disintermediated so that, you have paths, and it's not like everyone learns the same way and not everyone needs to learn the same thing. And I think we're beyond the point of having illiterate people for the most part. Like, we have a lot of stuff to read every day. We have a lot of math every day at a younger and younger age, right? So I'm excited about what you're doing. I'll ask a couple quick questions. One, how did you find your first student, and how have you grown this?
Great question. My marketing and advertising wasn't great in the early days. I kind of went with the if you build it, they will come model of entrepreneurship, which is not the most, it's not the easiest, not the best way to go for sure. But it was through outreach. I started talking to other families, primarily of students with cerebral palsy, because that's the group that I was in, and in different therapies and places all the time with those families, and saying, hey, if this still existed, and if you could bring your child's siblings and have one drop off, have one pickup, have everybody get what they need in one place, would that be interesting? And got a lot of really positive feedback from that. And then through word of mouth and social media, the first couple of students, and the first year was rocky. Like, we had a couple students, they didn't work out, they left. We had another student who was here for part of the semester. That student left. Another student came and was here for the remainder of the year. We ran a few homeschool classes and independent classes to try and get some interest and bring students in and pay the rent and get things started. So the first year was really up and down. By the second year, we opened with 7 students and doubled the next 3 years after that. So we were on our way once we kind of proved that we were here and we were in and we were staying and you can trust us.
I love it. That's amazing. If you had, I guess, advice for other founders, because I consider you a founder. You consider yourself a founder, by the way?
Absolutely.
Only one piece of advice for other founders, what would it be?
Just get started. Honestly, like, just do it. I have no business opening a school. When I opened a school, I've learned a ton about education in the 8 years since. But I saw that was where the need was, and I thought that was what was going to support my family and students, children that I could see around me, and saw that it wasn't happening in another way. And so anytime you can see that need and see a clear solution, there's no reason to not go for it. And it's those little baby steps. I worked a couple hours a day in the first years, just getting one thing done for the business every day.
That's great.
Just one thing. Like, I was a full-time mom. I had an infant. I was pregnant. Like, I couldn't I couldn't make it a full-time job, but it's that, do one thing that moves your business forward every day. And at the end of the year, you've done 365 things that have moved your business forward, and you've made a huge amount of progress. So doing that one thing, just getting started, just going. I read a quote recently. It was like millennial advice for Gen Z or something. But one of them was essentially anything that's worth doing wholeheartedly is also worth doing half-heartedly until you have the time and ability to do it wholeheartedly. So that's where my just get started comes from.
I think that's the one thing that I like about this too is like, I believe in create, make, and do, right? Like creators are the people that really change the world. And I think you've created something that's really unique and exciting. So I want to applaud you for that. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Our website, academysf.com. I can also be found on my own website at tanyasheckley.com and the Rebel Educator website at rebeleducator.com. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Those are the easiest ways to find me.
Amazing. We'll include those in the show notes. All right. The final thing is, when we have interesting people on our podcast, we like you to nominate other interesting people. We typically talk to founders or investors in scalable ventures, but I'm open to other ideas if you have them. So who would you like to nominate as a future guest of the Founders Pack Form Your Own Pack podcast?
See, this brings in my curiosity of like, who nominated me? How did I get
I
to
did.
be here?
I think I found you. I was like, oh, I need to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, other founders, there's definitely other people starting schools in the area. Marina Wasserman was on my podcast. She's an incredible school leader and founder. Komal Shaw down in San Diego is doing some fantastic work in education. And then I would also call out Mike Yates with Teach for America in the Innovation Lab, and the work that they're doing right now with artificial intelligence and hackathons with educators is fascinating.
All right, those are three amazing introductions. So we would love to connect with all three of them and invite you to the podcast. Tanya, thank you so much for spending time with me. I look forward to following the rest of your journey.
Thank you, Michael.